Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to reading Machiavelli's Discourse. We're still in book 2. Today we're looking at chapter 23. Okay, Machiavelli's Discourse. And what is the subject of 23? Is how much the Romans, in judging subjects for some accidents, they necessitated such judgments. They made the judgments. In other words, that some accidents that necessitated such judgments fled from the middle way. In other words, they either did it or didn't do it. They didn't do the middle way. Now he says, let's go right into the text. So therefore, they're judging subjects for some accidents that necessitated a judgment. Right? They fled from the middle way. So he goes, chapter 1. Now, paragraph 1 is very short. It says, now in Latinum, the state of affairs was that they could endure neither peace nor war. And quoted from Latin, from Livy 8:13, except war and peace are reversed. In other words, war was first and peace. So peace and war. 2. Of all unhappy states, the unhappiest is that of a prince or a republic brought to the extreme where it cannot accept peace or sustain war. So the unhappiness is that they can't accept the peace, nor can they sustain a war. Those are brought there who are offended too much by the conditions of peace. And on the other side, if they wish to make a war, must either throw themselves forth as prey for whomever aids them, or be left as prey for the enemy. So therefore, in other words, they can't fight a war, and because they can't really fight a war, they either have to make themselves prey who come to aid them, or be prey for the enemy. To all these extremes, one comes through bad counsel and bad policies, from not having measured one's forces well, as is said above. Right? He says. Discourses 2:10, right? You have to know your forces, know your resources, what is possible. For the republic or the prince that measures them well is led only with difficulty into the extremes the Latins were led into. In other words, if you know your measures of your forces, you don't make the mistakes the Latins made. When they should not have come to the accord with the Romans, they did come to an accord. And when they should not have declared war, okay, now 3 here is in faith. Should have, in other words, again, let's go look at this. This is broke both times in the sentence. So declared, they should not have broke war when they did break it. In other words, they should never have gotten a war when they did declare it. In other words, they should not have made the agreement when they came to an agreement. They should not have made peace when they did make peace with the Romans, and they should never have declared war when they did. Thus, they knew how to act in such a mode that the enmity and friendship of the Romans were equally harmful to them. In other words, they knew how to act in such a mode that the enmity of the friendship of Romans were equally harmful to them. The Latins were then conquered and altogether afflicted by Manlius Tarquinus and then by Camillus, who after constraining them to give in and consign themselves to the arms, limbs, right, not weapons, arms, right, the limbs, arms of Romans, putting guards through all the towns of Latinum, and taking hostages from all of them, returned to Rome and reported to the Senate that all Latinum was in the hands of the Roman people. Literally, again, Livy 8, 11 to 13. Because this judgment is notable and deserves to be observed, so that it can be imitated when similar opportunities are given to princes, I wish to bring up the words of Livy put into the mouth of Camillus. The words of Livy put in the mouth of Camillus. They vouched both for the mode of expansion the Romans took, and for how in judgments of state they always fled the middle way and turned to extremes. In other words, he says, he puts in Camillus, right? He puts his words into Camillus. It's Livy's judgment and put in Camillus that the Romans took this mode of doing this. They always took the extremes. For a government is nothing other than holding subjects in such a mode that they cannot or ought not offend you. In other words, two ways. In other words, government is nothing other than holding subjects in such a mode that they either cannot or ought not offend you, right? This is done either by securing oneself against them altogether. So it's either done by securing them all themselves, taking from them every way of hurting you, or by benefiting them in such a mode that it would not be reasonable for them to desire to change fortune, right? So there's two things. You secure them by taking a mode, taking away every hurting you, or benefiting them in such a way that it would be reasonable to do this. All this is comprised first by Camillus' proposal, and then by the judgment on it given by the Senate. His words were these: the immortal gods have made you so powerful over this decision as to put the decision in your hands, whether Latinum is to be or not to be. Therefore, you can provide perpetual peace for yourselves, as far as it pertains to the Latins, either by raging or by forgiving. Do you wish to make very cruel decisions against those whom have surrendered and have been conquered? You may destroy all Latinum. Do you wish to increase the Roman Republic? Right? Literally the thing or affair, the Roman thing, or the Roman thing, the Roman Republic, the thing or the Roman thing. On the example of your forefathers by accepting the conquered into citizenship. Matter is at hand for growing by means of the greatest glory. That rule is certainly the firmest and that most easily, in other words, the rule is certainly the firmest that is most easily obeyed gladly. Therefore, while their spirit is stupefied with expectation, you should preoccupy them either with punishment or with benefit, right? This is that speech that Livy puts into his mouth. Quoted from Livy 8:13 with substantial omissions, our translation makes use of Machiavelli's in his Del Mondoro Letrata Popula Ventili Rebelli, the mode of treating the rebel peoples in the Vicente in Martelli's opera, page 14. So therefore, it's going to, in other words, they relied on this work of Machiavelli to kind of explain this translation. of these Livy's words. The decision of the Senate followed this proposal in accord with the words of the council, right? Again, Livy 8:14. So they did what the council recommended, bringing forward town by town all those of some moments. They either benefited them or eliminated them. They gave exemptions and privilege to those whom were benefited, giving them citizenship, giving them the city, right? Giving them the city, and securing them on every side, right? They demolished the towns of others, sent colonies there, brought them to Rome, and dispersed them so they could do no longer hurt, either through arms or through counsel, right? They dispersed them. Nor did they, as I said, okay, 10, in the title of the chapter, right? Ever use the neutral way in the affairs of moment. This moment is the neutral way in the affairs of the moment, right? In other words, that they did not take the middle way. They took either benefiting them or crushing them, destroying harmony. Princes ought to imitate the judgment. The Florentines ought to have come close to this when Azero and all of Wydawnictwa rebelled in 1502. Again, Livy, Dick, in his Dimato Detrate, the Poppy of the rebellion. He sees the letter, right? The rebelled. For if they had done so, they would have secured their rule, made the city Florence very great, and given themselves the fields they lacked to live off of. But they use that middle way that is very harmful in judging men. They exiled part of the Argentine, fine part of them, took away from all of them their honors and former ranks in the city, and left the city intact. If any citizen consulted in the liberation that Arzano should be demolished, those who to themselves seem wiser said that it would be of little honor to the Republic to demolish it, since it would seem that Florence lacked forces to hold it. These reasons are among those that seem true and are not, since by the same reason a parasite, or someone criminal and scandalous would not have to be killed, since it would be a shame for the prince to show he does not have forces able to check one man alone. In other words, you kill him. Well, you can't check him. You don't have the means to patrol him. In other words, they should. Oh no, we couldn't control it. No. This is the thing. This is, you either benefit it or you harm it. And this middle way, there's a disaster. It looks beneficial, but no, it isn't. And by the same reason, he takes as true and are not, right? He says, again, that reason a parasite or some criminal and scandalous would not have been killed, because it's a shame that a prince cannot able to check one man alone. Such as have similar opinions do not see that men individually and a whole city together sometimes sin against a state, so that a prince has no remedy other than to eliminate it as an example to others and for his own security. In other words, they sometimes sin against the state or a prince, and there's no remedy other than to eliminate it as an example to others and his own the prince's security, the republic's security, right? Honor consists in being able and knowing how to punish it. In other words, honor is not just being, it's being able to know how to being able and knowing how to punish it, and in being able to hold it with 1,000 dangers. For the prince who does not punish whoever errs in such a mode that he can err, in other words, for the prince who does not punish whoever errs in such a mode that he can err no more is held to be either ignorant or cowardly. In other words, if you don't, in other words, someone who errs and you can't punish them, they cannot err again, you're looked as either ignorant or cowardly in that sense. And this is the problem of middle way, right? You don't do what's necessary to the time that's required. 4. How necessary this judgment is that the Romans gave is also confirmed by the sentences they gave on the prevenits. Okay, this is the 12, which is Livy 8, 19 to 21. Here, 2 things should be noted in the Livy text. 1, that it was said above that the subject should be either benefited or eliminated, right? The other is how much generosity of spirit, how much speaking the truth helps. When it was said in the presence of the prudent men, right? In other words, generosity of spirit and how much speaking the truth helps on this, right? The Roman Senate was gathered to judge the Prevenites, who, having rebelled, were then by force returned under Roman obedience. Many citizens were sent by the people of Prevent to beseech pardon of the Senate, and when they came into the presence, one of the senators asked one of them what punishment he considered the Prevenites deserved. To this, the Prevent responded, that which they deserve, who consider themselves worthy of freedom. To this the consul replied, if we remit your punishment, what sort of peace can we hope to have with you? To which he responded, if you give a good one, both faithful and perpetual. If a bad one, no long lasting. Again, this is and this is the next quotation. In other words, and this and next quotations are quoted in Latin with slight alterations from Livy, book 821. Whereupon, even though many were upset by this, the wisest part of the Roman Senate, the voice of a free man has been heard, nor could it be believed that any people, or indeed any man, should remain in that condition that was painful longer than it was necessary. Peace is faithful when men are willingly pacified, nor faith could be hoped for in a place where they wished for servitude. Upon these words, they decided that the Privates should be Roman citizens and honored them with the privilege of citizenship, saying only those who think of nothing except freedom are worthy to become Romans. Again, this is quoted in Latin precisely from 821, where these words are said by the consul Gaius Plautus. Now this is the case. Machiavelli is being faithful here. Usually he alters him, right? He's quoting him faithfully here. So much did this true and generous respond please generous spirits, that any other response would have been lying and cowardly, right? In other words, that answer that they gave, any other response would have been cowardly and cowardly in that sense. This is why those who believe otherwise of men, especially of those used to being or to seeming to themselves to be free, are deceived in this. And under this deception, they take up policies that are not good for themselves and not such as to satisfy them. So therefore, in other words, if you're not able to, in other words, his example here that he talks about, that you should either harm, benefit, or destroy, and do what is beneficial to you in that sense. And that the example of that they gave of the Pennovites of saying, "Oh, listen, we're used to being free. We want to be free. So therefore, if you benefit us, that is, he says." In other words, if you give a good one both faithful and perpetual, and a bad one not long lasting. And he goes, "This is a freedman has been heard." In other words, this is the truth of the matter in that sense. And he says that those who believe otherwise than this situation, that you can act this way, deceive themselves. Especially those used to being or seeming to be themselves free, are deceived in this. And under this deception, they got bad policies, not for themselves, but also that are not good for themselves and not such to satisfy themselves. From this arises frequent rebellions and the ruin of states. In other words, that they make bad choices, they make the wrong choice. They don't understand themselves. And by not understanding themselves, they make choices that are not good for them. Or, in other words, they're deceived in this. They take up policies that are not good for themselves and not able to satisfy themselves either. Okay? In other words, and this is why there's always frequent rebellion and this is ruined states. But to return to our discourses, I conclude from this and from this judgment given on the Latins, that when one has to judge powerful cities that are used to living freely, one must either eliminate them or caress them. Otherwise, every judgment is in vain. Again, this is Prince 3, right? Destroy them or caress them. Every other judgment is in vain. He repeats his discussion of Prince 3. One ought to flee altogether from the middle way, which is harmful. And as it was to the Samnites when they closed off the Romans at the Claudine Forks, right? In other words, Livy 9, 2 and 3. They did not then wish to follow the view of the old man who counseled them to let the Romans go honorably or kill them all, but took them away, disarming them and putting them under the yoke, letting them go full of ignominy and indignation. So a little later they came to know through their harm that the judgment of that old man had been useful and their decision harmful, as will be fully discoursed of it in its place. 18 in Discourses 3, 41 through 42. So we'll stop here. Put your comments or questions, please put them below. And and I'll respond to them when I see them. Like it, hit the like button, hit the like, it helps, Also, if you've liked it, share it on your social media, share it far and wide, share it to your friends. And if you have not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Please subscribe. Encourage your friends to come check the channel out. Encourage them to subscribe also. This helps grow the channel. Liking, again. So growing the channel, all this stuff. Commenting, liking, sharing, subscribing, all of this improves the algorithm so that people searching that this kind of video and these things will rise up on the searches, so people will find discourses. Oh, this is these discourse things that we've done here. If you didn't like it, you can always thumbs down it, but say why in the comments so people can benefit from this. Another thing, you want to follow me on social media, you can check out the social media links below. If you want to know more about me as an academic researcher, check out my research and scholarship stuff. You can check out my academic social media links below the social media links. And then, last but not least, if you want to help me to do what I do, you can contribute in that sense. You can do so through Patreon or Subscribestar. Links below. And then the other thing you do is, if you want another way you can assist and help, is to buy one of my currently available books listed below. You can do so at your local bookstore, Amazon, or through internet distributor like Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Libris, whatever, or ordering them directly through the publishers. The ebooks, I have one dedicated ebook, but some of the other books are available in ebooks also. You can either order it on my dedicated ebook. You can order it at Kindle, or even some of the LSU book and a couple of the books are available. I think the LSU book is available in Kindle and Barnes and other things, but they're available that way. You can order or directly through the publisher. So these are so normal books and ebooks. That's it. We will turn next time to 24. So therefore, on fortresses, again repeating some of the themes already dealt with by Machiavelli and the Prince, but second time around, right? So stop here right now. Take care and have a great day. Bye.